This video would not have been possible if it weren't for the contributions of PAXLARK. He has a YouTube channel, and I will link it in the description below. Check him out. Hong Kong. Only occupying 426 square miles, it is home to 7.5 million residents, making it one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Despite its small size, Hong Kong is one of the greatest economies on Earth, a major presence in financial services, trading, logistics, and tourism. To the people of Hong Kong, it is supposed to be an autonomous city-state with its own money, laws, language, and way of life until it becomes fully incorporated into the PRC. However, Beijing wants to erase the city's self-determination and have it become a part of the rest of the country. In response, hundreds of thousands of people are protesting the Chinese government's interference with Hong Kong's independence. Violent police crackdowns and street battles have revealed a deep division between Hong Kong and China, a division that has been building for nearly a century. To understand the relationship between China and Hong Kong, we must go back to its beginnings. Hong Kong was a British colony given as a concession by the Chinese after two opium wars in 1841 and 1860. The conflicts were sparked after the British created a drug trade in order to attain the silver they needed for tea, because nobody loves tea more than the British. After the British acquired Hong Kong, what was once a sparsely populated fishing village turned into a vital trading center with the West. Hong Kong was then fully leased to Britain in 1898 for a period of 99 years at the Second Convention of Peking, a span of time the ingenious British diplomat Claude MacDonald called as good as forever. Put a pin in that, as it becomes very important later. After 2 world wars, a Japanese occupation, and several revolutions on the mainland, we begin to see the transformation of the relationship between Hong Kong and China. Between 1912 and 1949, China was ignited into revolutions and civil war, which devastated the country. Eventually, the Chinese Communist Party, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, won the civil war and established the People's Republic of China under a one-party state. The government quickly moved to secure its power, nationalizing industries, stripping the peasants of their land, grouping them into collectivized farms, and implementing a 5-year plan to modernize the economy. The result of these programs was the effective death of private industry in China. Business owners and other refugees from the civil wars flocked to Hong Kong, who greatly benefited from this immigration. Coupled with the U.S. trade embargo on China in 1950, Hong Kong experienced a period of incredible growth, while China was diminishing as an economic power in the region. The city's culture began to transform into a mixture of British urbanism and Chinese tradition. Even today, if you walk around the city, the British era of colonialism is evident. It has 2 official languages, Cantonese and English, red telephone booths, double-decker buses, and streets named after figures in British history can be found all over the city. Even the harbor is called Victoria Harbor, named after Queen Victoria. Hong Kong was also the West's window into Chinese politics. Because the Communist Party largely isolated itself from the West, journalists and academics came to Hong Kong to keep in touch with China's evolving socialist society in what was referred to as China watching. Additionally, Chinese diplomats used Hong Kong to maintain some contact with the West. All in all, Hong Kong enjoyed a far greater standard of living and political rights than their mainland counterparts, who by this point lived in a fundamentally unfree and undemocratic society. Life expectancy in mainland China fell to around 40. However, good news for them, as Mao Zedong died from a heart attack in 1976. Afterwards, a man named Deng Xiaoping rose through the ranks of the Chinese Communist Party and became the de facto ruler of China. He embarked on a series of policies that amounted to a complete restructuring of China's economic system. The collectivized farms were broken up, and China shifted to a market economy, all while still under the one-party state. Additionally, with Nixon's earlier visit to China, the country began to open up to trade with the world again, and their people benefited from it. But even after all of this growth in mainland China, Hong Kong was still an economic powerhouse. If Hong Kong and China had fully reunified in 1982, Hong Kong would have represented 13% of China's total economic output, which is why China was eagerly awaiting Hong Kong's expiration date in 1997 as a British colony. In 1982, Margaret Thatcher met with Deng Xiaoping to discuss the Hong Kong handover, which was scheduled to take place 15 years later. After days of arguing and compromises, they settled on a transfer agreement. On New Year's Day, 1997, Hong Kong would be handed over to China, but it would retain a great degree of autonomy to the point that it could be considered its own country. Hong Kong would retain its legal rights, its own legal system, economic independence, and rights to free speech, association, and religion. This arrangement was called One Country, Two Systems. Under this agreement, Hong Kong would remain independent until July 17, 2047, after which it would be fully incorporated into China. China agreed to this plan because Hong Kong had a large amount of political leverage, since Hong Kong's flourishing economy was too valuable for China to let it slip out of their hands. But Hong Kong would not have this leverage for long. Over the past 20 years, China has seen its own economic explosion and urbanization, with small farming villages transforming into vast city skylines in little over a decade. The economic advantage that Hong Kong now had is obsolete, as the city only makes up 3% of China's total GDP. With China now having the economic advantage, the central government no longer wants to wait for the handover period to expire and has begun infiltrating Hong Kong's politics. How exactly is this happening? Hong Kong's government is split up into three branches: the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. The people don't vote for the chief executive, but rather it is chosen by a small election committee approved by the Chinese government. The chief executive is responsible for signing bills, communicating laws, and proposing laws to the legislative branch. The legislative branch, also known as the LegCo, are the ones who make the laws and policy. It consists of 70 seats, 30 of which are directly elected by the people. However, the other 35 seats are allocated to Hong Kong's institutions, such as the medical industry or the finance industry, all of which tend to lean pro-China. So, despite the people of Hong Kong consistently voting against Chinese influence, they only make up a minority of the LegCo. As of 2021, the seats elected by the people was decreased to 20, and 40 more seats were added, belonging to the aforementioned election committee. With their power in Hong Kong, the Chinese Communist Party has already taken measures to assimilate the city back into mainland China. All of this political and economic encroachment has culminated into a buildup of anger and rage towards the Chinese government, and all it needed was a spark to set it off. In 2018, a young couple from Hong Kong, Poon Hee Wing and Tony Chan Tong Kai, took a trip to Taiwan. While there, Tony murdered his girlfriend. He returned to Hong Kong and confessed to the crime to the Hong Kong authorities over a month later. However, this murder was committed in Taiwan, and Hong Kong and Taiwan don't have an extradition agreement, which meant that the only crimes Tony could be charged for were handling stolen goods and 4 counts of money laundering. He was released after only 29 months. In response, Hong Kong introduced a bill that would allow criminals to be extradited to Taiwan. However, this bill went even further, as it would allow criminals to be extradited back to mainland China, where they do not respect the same civil rights as Hong Kong does. The bill sparked a massive series of protests around the city. Hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong residents poured into the streets protesting the bill. These protests were met with violence from the police. Rubber bullets, tear gas, pepper spray, and other forms of police brutality were used against the protesters, with images the world had seldom seen since 1989 in Tiananmen Square. These crackdowns also came with an expansion of influence from the mainland. The TV news begins and ends with a rendition of March of the Volunteers and is delivered in Mandarin, despite the fact the majority of Hong Kong residents speak Cantonese in their daily lives. School books in Hong Kong now tell about the instability of the multi-party system in Western democracies and the superiority of the one-party state. The outbreak of COVID-19 has greatly reduced the number of large-scale protests. However, due to the high voter turnout, the pro-democracy parties won in a landslide victory in the 2019 district council election. Despite the increasing police crackdowns, the people of Hong Kong now have a greater political leverage against China and are using it to expand their independence for as long as they can until the full integration of Hong Kong into China occurs in 2047. Hi, I'm editing this and I realized I forgot to, voice an end card or anything, so I'm tired from editing this, but I'll do my best. If you're hearing this, you made it to the end of the video, so that's pretty cool. Thanks for watching. Again, I want to thank PAXLARK for his work and his frames that he made for me for this video. He really helped a lot in the process. I expect more videos on the way. I finished my college applications up, and that's why this video took so long to get out. But yeah, go follow my Twitter. I mostly post updates for the stuff I'm working on there. And I'll catch you guys next time, alright? See ya!